now I've marked the tops of the frets with marker pen, I'm now ready to recrown the frets to remove the little flat spot introduced by the levelling process. You'll notice that in doing that, I've also miraculously changed the colour of the guitar again. So it's amazing these things can happen. So, and I've also actually started this process. I've done the first sort of 4 or 5 frets halfway, so I'll demonstrate what I'm doing on the rest of them, and you'll see how I go about it. What I use are a couple of different tools. First one, I use it either depending on what I need. One is a curved diamond crowning file, and one is a straight diamond crowning file. This one's a little coarser, and I might use that if I've got a little more to take off, or if I need to just locally get to a certain bit. This curved piece here is quite useful, but the majority of it I do with this straight one. So the process, I like to, rather than do the whole width of the fret in one go, I work from this side and I do the lower half of the fret all the way along, then I'll flip the guitar around and do the other half. Now, I use the marker pen as a bit of a guide, but I find that the marker pen will disappear before you've got rid of all of the flat. So I wear the visor and I look very closely, and what I'm doing is looking to see the scratches on the fret, and I'm looking at that little band. You can just see on this one here, you can see that line is just tapering where I've done the bottom half, but I haven't done this half yet. And I just eye it up very closely, and I work very carefully, keeping that central band right in the middle of the fret, and I work away till I've just got the faintest line of scratches. Then I know I'm right at the height, because the black will actually disappear before the scratches have gone. So I like to pay a little bit more attention and make sure I'm exactly where it needs to be. So I'll carry on with these, and then we'll move on to the next bit. Risk with using the straight one is you can file a lot more off behind where you think you're working, so I like to keep checking, and I use the front part of the file as much as possible. I can see, although the black has disappeared virtually all the way across, I can still see there's a very fine line there. Now that's good. I'm happy with that. Move on to the next one. Some of them go perfect first time, some you just need to have to work at a little bit. I like that line to be nice and even. So that's good. Right, I keep that fairly clean. I use a little wire brush just to keep that clean. And move on to the next one. Right, now I've finished recrowning the frets. I've been over both sides, carefully bringing it down so it's a nice radiused shape on the top. Now, before I go on to the next step, I just want to double check that I haven't introduced any irregularities anywhere along the line. I shouldn't have done, but I like to be sure. So there's always the possibility that you can work away at a little area too much and end up with a spot that's a bit out. So I'll go over it with the fret rocker again, just to check there's nothing untoward. I don't expect that there will be, but it's always worth just double checking that I haven't. No. All It's all pretty good so far. So what I'm doing here is I'm not just sliding it along the fret, I'm constantly, well, that appears irregular because it's at an angle. I'm constantly working away at the fret rocker, moving it upwards and downwards just to see if there's any irregularities. And there aren't. Last one. Well, that's good. That's perfect. So I haven't introduced any irregularities. It's still all true. So we can move on to the next stage, which is to round off the fret ends a little bit. Because this is a new guitar, the fret ends get snipped off and they're all sharp. So before I get into the painting stage, I round them off a bit, but I like to do the final little bit of rounding off now before we get onto the final polishing stage. So for this, I use one of these little fret end files, and it's a fiddly job because you've got to do both sides of each fret and both ends of each fret, so it's a little bit of a time consuming process to do nicely, but I like to start here. Being right-handed, it's easier for me to work this way, so the right hand side of the fret as I'm facing it is always slightly easier than this side. I have to work sort of away from myself, but you just have to sort of adjust your technique slightly. So I'll start at the first fret, work down here. I like to do one side of the fret and then the other side of the fret all the way down, and then we'll flip the guitar around, do the other side. So what I tend to do is I'll do sort of 2 or 3 passes at a steep angle like that, then a couple at 45, and then a couple at a much more shallow angle. And then I just mainly focusing at this point. And what I'm doing when I'm doing those first passes is I'm rolling the file around the fret. So I take some off the side and a little bit off that very top corner. I don't like to take too much off the top corner to keep as much playing area as possible. So once I've done that, I then do, focusing this time mainly down in the corner, sort of a curved pass, just gently to make sure that's nice and round. Also occasionally, due to the nature of it, you get a little tiny bit of fret just at the bottom which you haven't cleared off, so I flip the fret file around and just clear that off. It will normally get taken off in the polishing process anyway. So that's that side of that one done. Right, now I've done this the right hand side of the fret as I'm facing it, so I've now got to do the other side, which involves working sort of the other way round. I find this a little bit fiddlier, but it's much the same process. And again, I just going 2 passes at different angles, and then just a round one there. The first pass is just rolling around the fret, so I'm taking a little bit off the top. And that is get rid of. That's that, nice and smooth and ready for ready for the final few processes. So I keep another thing I like to try and do is make sure the ends look exactly the same. So I tend to, because I'm right-handed, I tend to push a little harder the other way and take a bit more off. So I just need to Just address that so that the end is nice and symmetrical. It doesn't really matter, but well, it must matter a certain amount, or I guess I wouldn't do it. But this side, the fret's on this side here, so I'm now going to work on the other side. So this involves a bit more working over the body, which is a little bit of a fiddle. It's exactly the same process. You just can't take a full stroke with the file, so you just have to be a little bit more careful. Another good reason for protecting the body, because it's all too easy to slip and gouge big lumps out of the top of the guitar, which would not be part of the plan. So you just have to be a little bit, take little short strokes with this, and maybe a couple more, just to get it where it needs to be. Again, rolling around the fret at 3 different angles, and then a little roundish stroke near the bottom. That's it. That's all those fret ends done. No sharp bits. Hardly any blood. So, which is usually a good sign. So that's it. We've got the frets levelled, crowned, the ends are rounded over. So now we're on to essentially the polishing stage. But rather, you can't really go straight to polishing. We need to first of all get rid of all the scratches we've introduced from the file mark on the ends and from the diamond files on the crowns of the frets. To do that, what I use is a piece of emery paper or wet and dry paper. This is 600 grit, and I wrap that around one of the curved crowning files. I use the straight one for this job. So I wrap that around like that, and then I start very carefully working along the surface of the fret. Just looking as I go to see that the scratches are being removed. Just being a little bit careful. There's a little bit there at the end, needs a bit more work. Again, I'm not looking at reducing the height at all. I'm taking off as little as possible, and then once that bit of paper has got worn, I just roll it around the file so I get a fresh piece of abrasive, and then move on to the next one. That's good. I'm not attempting to polish the fret at this stage. I'm just removing the coarser scratches. There's 2 polishing stages after this. So the first one of those is a coarser grit. So that will take these put it straight. That would help. Take these finer scratches out, and then the final one gives it a nice polish. Now I've been across the tops of all the frets with the emery paper and cleaned them up. I just like to give a final inspection on each fret and go over it. Exactly the same process, but there's occasionally the odd little bit that I haven't quite picked up with the paper around the crowning file. So I just like to go over it and inspect each fret individually. Just go over it just by hand, just using the tip of my finger, which being flexible will conform to the shape of the fret, and take out any other little marks that I might have missed. Okay, just working. Just a tiny bit there. That's it. And just tip your head from side to side. You can see the light catching the surface, and you can pick up little marks that you might have missed. It's all looking quite good. I'm not applying a lot of pressure here. I'm just the paper do the work really. Trying to remove as bare minimum possible. So I've taken all the sanding marks off the tops of the frets. Now we're pretty much ready to go for polishing, but again, because we've had an abrasive on the top of the frets, I'd just like to go over it again with the fret rocker just to check I haven't got any errors. There aren't usually, but it's just I like to check, because it's easier to deal with any issues now than it would be later on. So we'll just run over. It's all looking good. There was a tiny bit of movement just on the 12th fret, but that's what we want because we've got a little bit of fall away. So as it is with the next straight, a tiny bit of movement there at the 12th fret is exactly what we want. So that's good. Last one. Perfect. Happy with that. One last thing to do before we go to polishing, and that's to take the file marks off the fret ends. So the polishing itself will take a lot of it out, but I just like to go over it with a bit of emery paper and just clean that up as much as I can. So what I'll do is I'll tear off a smaller piece of emery paper, and to get the radius bit, I just use a small piece of emery paper and just holding it at an angle, just work it up and down. Fairly steep angle, because I don't want to take any off the top of the frets. Just allow it to fall into the side of the fret and clean that up. Doesn't take too much. Then to clean up the very end of the fret, I do the same thing but with a little flat sanding block. Wrap a bit of emery around it, and again carefully at an angle. And I'm not worried about touching the lacquer because it's all taped up. So all I'll really do is hit the end of the fret just to take any little marks off there. That is good. Right, just do the other side and we're ready for polishing. Final part of the process is to give the frets a polish, which I do on the polishing machine here. There's a coarse compound on this mop and a finer compound on that mop to give it a final shine up. So I'll just load the wheels up with some polish and we'll get going. I like to do the ends first and then do the top surface of the frets. So start like this. Now I've done the ends, I'll do the face. And this is part of the reason you'll see I've mummified the top of the guitar quite so much, because it's very easy to catch the top of the guitar with the wheel. So rather than going into that edge, I flip the guitar round to the lower half of the frets. Looks very good. So we'll go on to the finer compound in exactly the same process and make them shiny. Inspecting the ends to see there's no marks left anywhere, and that all looks good. So go on to the top. I allow myself to be a little bit more aggressive with it because this compound is so fine that it's close to zero chance of introducing any errors. So all we're really doing is taking out the final, very, very fine marks left by that compound, which is close to nothing. That, I think, is about that. That's it. Right. We're done. All that remains is to remove the tape, clean up all the gungy polishing compound, and we can then go on to finish polishing the lacquer, which again will involve another process of running down the ends so that the fret ends will get another even finer polish when I polish the lacquer on the edge of the frets. So it'll all come together quite nicely, but that looks very, very good. Nice and level, nice and shiny. I don't know whether the camera will pick that up. You'll probably see it a little bit better once I've got the masking tape off. There we go. Right, let's get it unmasked and admire our handiwork. As I said, the end to the frets will get another little bit of a polish, and the edge of the board will get polished when I polish the lacquer back on the mop again. When I complete the polishing process on the rest of the lacquer, and the board will get a final clean up just to get rid of any little bits of residue around the frets, and it will get a final oiling, and it'll all look very beautiful. And I'll cut some slots in the nut, I'll fit some tuners, I'll make a truss rod cover, fit that, fit some pickups, I'll fit the bridge, some wiring, some strap buttons, cover for the back, etc, etc. And we can make all the noises. Happy days. Good, right, that's that step done. Get the next one finished up and I can get back to polishing the lacquer. Thank you for watching.